Welcome to Socio-Witchery, a show about magic and meaning-making. I'm Stacy, sociologist, witch, and energy worker. I'll be talking about how to deepen our craft and our lives by unpacking the meanings and exploring the meaning-making strategies underneath magic and all kinds of magical workings. This is episode 1, all about Imbolc as a season and about the themes of Imbolc and how to turn this often dreary time of year into a beautiful celebration of hope and life. Hi, and thank you for joining me. Today, I'm talking about Imbolc. I'm going to talk about my seasonal approach to the Wheel of the Year in the first place. I'll explore the meanings of Imbolc, some of the themes, and some ways to incorporate thinking about these meanings and themes throughout the season. Along the way, I'll talk about some specific practices, things that you might want to try or things that you maybe haven't thought about, and share some of the way that I approach the celebration. First, I want to give you just a little bit of background about my approach to the Wheel of the Year as seasons rather than Sabbats and why I do that and how it works for me. In the first place, I find that it's more in keeping with living in a way that's attuned to the rhythm of the world rather than celebrating the Sabbat on a day or two and then leaving it all behind. I like the continuity of the meaning that comes with treating them as seasons. It keeps my awareness of the meaning of each Sabbath at the forefront of my mind and of my life throughout the time. And that helps me stay present in the values and energies of each celebration, which I really appreciate. And I also like that it differentiates the celebration from secular approaches to holidays. For a lot of secular holidays, or holidays that I treat as secular that may not be secular for you, but for a lot of other holidays, there's so much work and prep, and there's just so much stuff to do. It's very busy. And then you sit down to enjoy it, and you're exhausted. And then it may be wonderful and lovely, but then boom, it's over. And treating the Sabbats as seasons instead of doing it that way, I think creates the space for secular holidays to become events, even high points, against the kind of backdrop. And it's sort of this broad, connected way. And then it becomes this sort of celebratory tapestry of life. And the secular holidays can be these peaks, but the Sabbats and the Sabbat seasons can be a more mindful, kind of spiritually forward way of living. And then lastly, it's just really nice. It makes it special, and it makes it more fun. And for me, it makes it more sacred. And it all just the intentionality of it just feels fabulous. Okay, let's get to Imbolc. Imbolc was, or began, if you approach it seasonally, on either February 1st or February 3rd, depending on what tradition you follow. So we have a few weeks left before Ostara, and so I wanted to start there with Imbolc. Since Imbolc is midwinter, and we're mid-Imbolc, I like the symmetry of that, and I also just really like Imbolc, so I wanted to start with Imbolc. So I'm going to talk about the themes and the meanings that I find in the Sabbat, but without working with Brigid. Now, this is a bit of a challenge since for a lot of people, Imbolc is really all about Brigid, or at least about the representations and the things that we do related to Brigid. For people with a deep connection to her, I suspect that by itself provides meaning and a sacred context. But if you don't work with deities, which I don't, or maybe you do, but you're just sort of going through the motions in this particular Sabbat, or maybe you just want some new ideas, perhaps you'll find some new ideas here to help you celebrate what I think is actually really a special time of the year. So I'll start with midwinter. Imbolc is at midwinter. Half the winter is behind us at Imbolc, and half is still in front of us. And the significance of this depends a bit on the climate where you live, I think. For me, it's still going to be cold and snowy for a couple more months, so it doesn't exactly feel like midwinter, but I think it makes it even more important to think about it for people who are living where there's still many more months of cold and dark. But either way, it marks a point in a journey of sorts, a chance to celebrate the half-over aspects. The days are getting a little bit longer. The sun might begin to break through the clouds a little bit more. So this is a great time to go looking for change in the world, change in the season, right? Very, very early changes. There might be snowdrops in your area or crocuses that are just starting to peek out through the snow. There might be rabbits that are starting to venture forth. Maybe you're even seeing some light green underneath snow patches that are melting or just spreading across lawns. Again, this very climate specific, but whatever the signs of, not of spring, but the signs of the fading of winter, whatever those signs are in your area, this is a good time to go looking for them. If you're outdoorsy, that's right up your alley. You're probably doing that already. I am not at all outdoorsy. So for me, this happens when I'm running errands or when I'm walking the dog. I'm very much a city person. And so this is going on for me in the course of my daily life, just paying attention to shifts at a time when I think we really need evidence of shifts. The other thing that I do around the midwinter thing is that because it's only midwinter and because I celebrate things as seasons rather than days, I look at it as a transitional period from Yule to Ostara. And I use it in lots of ways, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it helps bridge it's kind of like a changing of the energy for me. After Yule, I usually take down the major Christmas decoration somewhere in early to mid-January, but I'll leave up things that aren't specific to Yule or Christmas, things that are about winter. So I have snowflake motifs and evergreen things, placemats and garlands, lots of dark greens, maybe some holly berries. And I'll leave that up and I'll start to take those down at Imbolc. And I call it lightening the green because really it's a shift away from the deep greens of winter, of the solstice, of Yule, of evergreens, to a lighter, springier, fresh green. So I'm really focusing on light and just slowly, because if you cut out all of the winter stuff too early, then you're left with a whole lot of dreary nothingness. And I don't like that. I like to have something going on. And then I do things like just making sure that I'm opening the curtains every morning, which maybe I haven't bothered with over the last couple of weeks, just focusing on the light coming back and really starting to think about light. In keeping with thinking about light, on Imbolc itself, I like to light a candle in every room in the house just to mark and remind myself that light is coming back to all the corners. If you don't have that space, you might light a candle at each of the directions or each of the corners of your room, and that would work too. Anything that really intentionally marks the return of light is nice. I think that it's easy to not really feel Imbolc or not really be excited about Imbolc, or I think Imbolc is kind of an underrated Sabbat because it's so dreary for a lot of us by the time Imbolc comes, and spring feels so far away. Yuletime holidays are a lot of work for a lot of people. Our energy is low. Seasonal affect disorder has taken root. And all of that, though, is part of what I find so special about turning the corner at midwinter, and why I think it's even more important to stop and say, okay, things are changing, and here's how I can tell things are changing, and here's how I can stay aware of the change, and here are ways I can celebrate the change. For me, I find that's really good for me at this time of year. And as one of the 4 fire festivals, Imbolc is also very much about fire. I know that for people who do work with Brigid or Brigid, the roaring hearth fire can be a really important aspect of Imbolc or of their altars. But to me, Imbolc is a time when, we're halfway through, we're running out of fuel on all the levels. It takes more to keep the fires going. It takes more to keep our energies up, but there's still more winter to go. So we're simultaneously halfway done and only halfway done. So I like to use fire a little more sparingly at Imbolc. It's very different for me than winter solstice. And I enjoy the more solitary configuration of candlelight at Imbolc. I think about the fire aspect really in terms of stretching out the light and the warmth, in terms of maximizing natural light as it begins to increase, paying attention to it, being grateful for it, and also for the purification aspect of fire. And that leads to another central theme of Imbolc, which is purification. I know that some people at Imbolc do their spring cleaning. For me, it's way too far from spring weather for me to do any spring cleaning. But I do an energetic cleanse and clearing at Imbolc that is different than my normal smudging and different than my ritual clearings. And I find that that's a pretty great way to bring in the energy of purification and cleansing without doing a spring cleaning when it doesn't feel like spring for me yet. So I like to do each room again, and I clear energetically with either sage or energies, and often I use clapping, which I'll talk about more in a later episode. But anything that I can do to kind of get that stagnant winter energy moving, to freshen things up, to clear it all out, that's a nice way to work with the purification symbolism of Imbolc. It's also aligned with that shift from dark to light, from stillness to energy. You might plan a nice bath ritual for some time during Imbolc as a season. You might take on a decluttering project, which is always nice after the winter holidays. And then the last aspect of Imbolc energy is the most special for me and probably the one that people talk about the most. The lore around Imbolc is that the word Imbolc comes from Irish for in the belly. There's some disagreement about whether that's actually true, and one of the other possibilities is that it comes from the word for ewe's milk. But bolg means belly in Irish, and im means butter. So somewhere in there, there's belly and there's dairy. So it all comes together in traditions around lambing season, which is also thought of as the time or the season of quickening. Now, quickening is the very start of the movement of a fetus. I don't know when yous feel that. and I mean ewes as in the plural of female sheep, and not use as in the way that some of my relatives addressed groups of people. I don't know when yous feel that, but in humans, this happens at about 18 to 20 weeks. So this is before the fetus is viable. It's before the fetus can survive outside the womb, the quickening. And this is an important aspect of Imbolc energy for me, because it's about the very earliest stirrings of newness, of hopes and ideas, of life, of energies, of new directions. It's about just the absolute beginnings. It's about potential, but not promise. It's a transition from the dark stillness of early winter to the flutterings of life and light, to the sort of just the very earliest movements. I find it to be a time of anticipatory energy. It's very anticipatory. There's excitement, but it's so new, and the excitement even is fragile. The newness is just sort of a glimmer or a murmur, when a project or an idea is just beginning to take shape as a potential. So they're just seeds at this point. They need the right conditions in order to become something. And that's what I mean by potential but not promise. There are stirrings there, but the conditions have to be right for it to come to fruition. So one of the things that I do on actual Imbolc is to sit down and really think about the year to come. On secular New Year, I set goals, or at least focus on themes, like a lot of people. But Imbolc is the time for me to really plan actions that I want to take throughout the year, projects that I want to tackle, and emotional and energetic work that I might want to do. I do this in much more detail than I do with New Year's Eve resolutions. I break down each aspect, and I have a think about the time frames and about monthly goals, and I really try to wrap my mind around what I want the upcoming year to be. At this point, it's long enough after the holidays that I'm beginning to catch my breath a little bit again, and I can start to think about me and what's going on for me, and I find it's a really good time to just take stock and make plans. So it's also a great time for gardening, which I know lots of magical people do. I don't garden, but I do have a click and grow, and I also grow microgreens, by which I mean I put some stuff down in a baking dish, and then I throw some microgreen seeds in, and then I leave it alone, and when it grows, I eat it. And that's the extent of my gardening. And then the other thing that I do on Imbolc itself, while I'm talking about that, are about food and drink. Now, I don't like to cook. That's an understatement. I really don't like to cook. But for Imbolc, I do like a nice, simple, hearty stew. And I also like to have some kind of oat bread or oat cake. I'm always in a really oaty mood at Imbolc. I'm always wanting oats. I think that's because they're so nourishing and they feel so comforting. And if you're not an oat person, this won't resonate at all. But I just love the rusticness of anything oaty at Imbolc. One of the other things that I do is I make a drink that you may know called Athol Bros. It's a Scottish drink that's been traditional there, I think on their New Year's since the 1500s or something. And it's basically whiskey with honey and oat milk and cream. And the traditional recipe is a whole lot of work around making the oat milk from oats and straining it through a cheesecloth. And I have done that, but I find that the extra effort for me does not justify the difference in taste, which I find to be minimal. So I just mix some honey in some extra creamy oat milk, and add that puppy to my whiskey, and that's my Athol Bros. But I like that on Imbolc. That's really nice. It's another thing that I do only on Imbolc, and that helps as well for it to feel special and sacred and Imbolc-y. But all of this stuff, not the Athol Bros, but the other things that I do on Imbolc is all in keeping with that very early, very fragile newness of the energy of the quickening. And ultimately, I find Imbolc to be a time, a liminal time, a time of being in between spaces, not quite all dark, still, and reflective, but not yet light, buzzing, and energetic. It's a time that really calls for a gentle energy. It's a very gentle time, I think. It's starting to get a little busy, but still the nurturing and the newness, and you need to kind of cherish what you're beginning to think about and what you're beginning to build. It's a reflective mood for me, Imbolc energy, but one that's looking forward, one that's just beginning to create, right? To plan, to plant, and then kind of protecting those seeds. And it's also a spiritual time because it's all wrapped up in a kind of cosmic trust. Trust that we'll have enough fuel and energy, that there's enough light, that the days will get longer, that the sun will come back, and that at least some of the seeds that we plant will grow and then flourish, and then become something wonderful. So this is why I find Imbolc so special, because it brings together these ideas of celebrating at the midpoint. The winter's half over, but there's still half to go, and taking stock, and purification, cleansing and clearing, and then the newness of it, the fragility. There's something beautiful in the fragility of new hope, and new endeavors and new projects and new life. There's something, I think, just really life-affirming and bolstering, especially throughout the month of February, something bolstering about planting your seeds and taking good care of them. Whatever those seeds are and wherever you're planting them, deciding what to plant, planting them, caring for them, nurturing them, and trusting that something good will come out of them. It's just a beautiful process. And so I find Imbolc to be a really spiritual, really powerful time. And I hope that some of this will help you see some of that in Imbolc as well. And I thank you very much for joining me today to have a think on Imbolc. I hope that you'll join me also on Wednesday for my next episode, when I will be deep diving into the limitations of empiricism, the use of our five senses, as the path to knowledge and understanding. A very different episode on Wednesday. I will have lots of fun, and I hope that you will join me and have fun too. Enjoy the rest of Imbolc, everybody. Take care.